Good afternoon, everyone. Patrick from Education for Life, and today we're here with Latham. Thank you for having me. And Latham, she's a mother of 5, from 6 till 13, right? So a quite big range of kids, much bigger than ours. We're on the way, but still have only 3. And we're going to be talking a little bit about homeschooling.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about, first of all, what is really, I'm really curious about to know, is why a teacher like yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have been teaching and your husband is also teaching. Mm-hmm. How comes that 2 teachers from the mainstream school, right, have decided to homeschool their kids?
It started, I think, as an emotional decision because I didn't have a very good time in elementary school. I was bored, I was bullied. I just remember being scared a lot of the time. I was scared of being wrong, and I was scared of saying the wrong thing, and I was scared I wouldn't be included, and my husband had a similar experience. But then our first son was born, and he had ADHD. He has ADHD. So he gets bored very easily. He remembers almost everything you say to him, and he gets bored very easily. And when he gets bored, he can sort of act out because it's so uncomfortable for him being bored. He was also born in January, so he would have been months ahead of some of the other kids in his grade level, which just would have increased the boredom because he reads a lot. So he has a lot of information. He gets it very quickly. So we were afraid of him being labeled the bad kid because he wouldn't sit still or keep quiet. And he also has Tourette's syndrome. So we were just worried about him being teased and bullied. And he's just so joyful and so curious and so enthusiastic about everything. We couldn't bear to send him to this place where that might be crushed. And because I'm a teacher, I'm an academic, so I love research, and I started reading more about the education system, and Ken Robinson's lectures were really important. They were extremely empowering for me, and they just made so much sense on so many levels. So we kept our eldest son home, and then our daughter was born 17 months after our eldest, and she and he were just best friends. They're so close, and there's no way we would have sent her to school and kept him at home.
Are they still best friends?
I think so, yeah. They fight, they all fight sometimes, but they're very close.
All the kids are here, by the way, so
yeah, they're all watching very carefully. And then we had our third, and by that time it was we really believed strongly that this was the right thing for them. And I'm extremely fortunate that I have a job teaching college where I can do a lot of my work online and from home, so my schedule is very flexible. And we also hired childcare help for a few years too when the kids were really young. But it's a blend. It's a blend of emotion. It's an emotional decision. It's an academic decision. It's a personal decision, for each child and what their personalities are and their relationships are, and with the rest of the kids. And there are other, I could go on all day. I don't want the kids to learn how to wait and to sit and wait to be told what to do. I want them to be able to figure out what to do on their own.
Are they? Are they able?
They're very able to occupy themselves. They play board games together and card games, or they start projects if they're interested in them. And they also know how to be bored and how to work their way out of that on their own. They know how to relax and stop and just look out the window, and they can go outside. Mills, my middle daughter, is very much an outdoors person, and she'll go out and dig or pick raspberries outside or something on her own, and they need to have a real self-awareness to do that. They need to be able to be comfortable with themselves and sit in their own skin for a while to really understand how they feel, instead of somebody telling them where to go and what to do and how to behave all the time. And the other thing too is, neither my husband nor myself are close to our siblings at all. We don't even speak to them. And I think about how much time I spent as a child desperate to get along with the people in my class. I never see those people. I should have been learning how to get along with my brother and building a strong relationship with my brother. So these kids, even though there's a range of ages and personalities, they get along with each other. They fight sometimes, yes, but they can also play and get along together, which is really important to me. And I don't think people discuss that when they talk about homeschooling, the value to siblings and building their relationships and learning how to get together. There's still sibling rivalry. Yes, there is. Of course there is. Yes, but we talk about it too. We say, is this about the teddy bear or is this about power?
All right. And well, it's very interesting. And how, I think for myself and also for the people watching, how does it look, your ideal day or your day?
That's a very hard question to answer because I think we're probably more unschoolers than homeschoolers. Everyone's, yeah, well, if we have a lot of things that they do during the day. For instance, Tuesday mornings they have a drama group with other homeschoolers.
All of them, all 5?
4. Okay. 4 out of 5. So Hugo and I hang out while the older 4 are doing that. You know, every other Friday, Hugo and Lou have hockey that they do with other homeschoolers.
Someone has
and Jordy
ballet,
goes to. Yes, they have ballet. They have piano lessons, but not all of them. You know, Hugo and Jordy do piano. Lou does ballet. Mills does jiu-jitsu.
Hockey.
4 of them do chess club. All 5 of them do hockey.
All of them do swimming, except 2.
3 of them do swimming, and 3 of them have paper routes as well. So we find that
I get money from...
Sometimes you do, yes, if you help. We find that the structured skills-based stuff, you know, learning how to do cursive writing and learning about long division and learning how to write a paragraph, those things tend to get fit in when we have a moment. When I'm okay and I can concentrate and things are quiet and there's somebody, okay, let's sit down and do this now.
So do you schedule anything or it's just coming up whenever you have time?
No, we build everything around the stuff that's scheduled.
Okay.
Because
which is
there's so
usually
much
outside, so it's outside classes, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We have curriculum workbooks, so we know what the other kids in mainstream school are doing.
Yeah.
And so we know that we're keeping up with that. In some cases, for instance, my eldest would be ahead of the game. His reading abilities are somewhere in the grade 12 range, even though he's only in grade 8, according to his date of birth. But his writing is not where it should be, right? So they're allowed to...
Where it should be, where
the grade, yes, exactly. According to his age.
Because the word should, it's implying
the should is,
that, you know, tells
all
you
kids
where they should be. But
learn the same way on the same schedule, which is definitely not the case. My middle child...
I mean, I think it's very important to point out the wording that we're using, because in society, you know, should be, because everyone is doing so in the mainstream school, but it's absolutely wrong.
And I have so much anxiety about that, because I was so concerned when I went through school getting straight A's and meeting and exceeding every expectation. And
was it your expectation or was somebody?
It was the school's expectations, but also it was my understanding that that's what I had to do to get my parents' attention. So there was a lot of family dysfunction involved in that too. So I don't want my kids ever to feel like they have to get a certain grade or be better than the other kids to make themselves or me happy or the teachers happy. Like, what makes you happy?
Well, if it makes yourself happy, that's pretty much fine. If it's healthy, being happy. But if it's to make the teacher happy or the parents happy, then there is, you know, dysfunction coming up.
And Ken Robinson talks about how when they're in school, a lot of the time they're just learning low-level clerical skills. So the creativity and the flexibility and the adaptability and the responsibility, these are the things, the sort of intangibles. Those are the things that we're putting at the front of the line. But yeah, it's...
How do you think you practically do that? Just by letting them the space to do that and create it by themselves, or you give hints, or you have a system?
Probably the biggest educational driver that we have in this house is no screen time. No movies, no TV, no video games, no computers, unless we're doing something specific like looking up something, because we were talking about marsupials and kangaroos, weren't we? And do you remember what we looked up? What did we look up on the TV? Or on the computer?
How the kangaroos, the baby kangaroos get into the pouch?
That's right. How do the baby kangaroos get into the pouch when they're this small? So we looked up a video on that. But that's really the extent of our time in front of screens. So they read. When you take away the screens, something magical happens. You fill the house with books. They read, and they read, and they read,
and they read. Well, that's what I felt when I entered here, because it was very calm. I think everyone was reading, or pretty much, or
drawing, and that is the thing that probably drives their education the most, because when you read, you're not just, we have a lot of historical fiction too, so it's not just a matter of putting the words together and making sense of them. It's also learning grammar instinctively, so I never have to teach grammar. Spelling is also not very difficult to teach because they spend so much time with the words already. But it's also learning about history and geography and different cultures, because we try to get books that offer a real range. My daughter knows about started learning about slavery in America by reading the Chains series. My eldest son loved the Horrible Histories books, which is a British series, and he's learned a ton about history from that. He knows more about mythology than I ever will, just from reading the Rick Riordan books. So I really think that that's been the biggest force, is just this exclusion of screen time.
And you had to do that, of course, you and your husband, I think you had to decide on that, right? Yeah,
in the beginning we tried to make it equal, or we tried to say, okay, if you do your workbook for 20 minutes, then you can have 20 minutes on the computer. Well, when there are 5 of them, it's got this pull. It's really unsettling, actually, the pull of the screen. So if you put one kid on a screen, the rest of them are looking around, what is he doing, what has he got? And they're not concentrating on what they're doing, or they're rushing through it to get to the screen next. And then there can be arguments about who had screen time longer. I have to become a police. I have to police the screen time, which is more work and stress for me. And finally, we realized there was no way of doing it that would make it less stressful. It was always going to be stressful. It was always going to be a distraction. So we got rid of it, and it's the best decision we ever made. And at the same time, you're saying that you work pretty much online, right? So you, as a teacher, I'm on the computer as a teacher, very frequently. And how do you manage that kind of, they see you on the computer, they don't want to be on the computer because they see you? They understand that I'm not on there playing video games. I'm only on there working. So when I write for the paper, I'm usually on my laptop, and they understand I'm on there, I'm working. And when I'm on the desktop, they understand I'm grading and I'm checking emails. And it's not attractive to them in the least, because it's just my job. But then we turn it off, and it's off. And I think many would be thinking at home we live in the 21st century, so everything is about electronic, about the ability of using computers, etc. So do you feel like they're gonna be lacking something in these terms, or? No, I think that it's pretty instinctive and easy when they pick it up. I know just the time that they have been on the computer when they're looking something up or we're working on some topic. It's click. There's something very instinctive about the way kids approach technology and iPads, and I don't worry about that at all, because that's something they can learn later on. Right now in their development, they're supposed to be learning social skills. They're supposed to be learning self-awareness. My job is protecting their creativity and giving them space to grow and figure out who they are and be happy with who they are and work on that kind of stuff, because that stuff is hard. There are a lot of adults in this world who don't know who they are and don't know how to be happy. So that's what I want them to be concentrating on. If they need to use a computer later on, frankly, it's not hard. And if there's anything more complex, they can learn. They can take a course. They've been learning how to figure out many things by themselves, because they have the time and the space to do that. And they've seen I'm not good at this at all, but their father's very mechanical minded, and he goes on YouTube and watches videos. If he needs to figure out how to take apart some dog clippers and what part is it, they've seen you can learn a lot of things just by sitting down and watching these sort of mini lessons or lectures. I don't think it's intimidating to them at all. Everyone wants to grab the phone.
Okay, you were just maybe because it can be interesting. You were talking about ADHD before, so can you just explain quickly and tell me why do you think that kids nowadays, like how many of your kids they have
3 out of 5
diagnosed ADHD? Which again, there is a lot of debates on the subject.
I mean, I'm certain there are a lot of kids who are prescribed medication for ADHD just to make them quiet in school when they are justifiably bored.
The thing is that it's very demanding from any adult once you know that a child is ADHD or demanding or different, because at the end it's I think it comes down to being different. Every child is different. So and we were talking together about ADHD the other week, and I checked a little bit online and I found a lot of resources and a lot of information, even about the same PhD doctor that kind of labeled ADHD, that after a few years he said that it's not existing practically. So there is a lot of debate around the subject, but I think what it really comes down to is just the differences that there are between kids. And even if I think about myself or pretty much any adult that I know, there are things that you like doing and therefore you are able to focus on that, or there are things that you simply don't like. So when children, especially in school, I talk about school, but especially when in the class, some kids, they cannot focus on some subjects, and pretty much they are not focusing on anything but on those specific subjects, is because they are not interested in. So of course they are, their mind is just traveling and thinking about other things because they are not interested in the subject.
I think that happens for all of us, whether we're children or adults. I think for me the difference is some of the there's also impulsiveness and risk-taking, placing yourself deliberately in situations where you're going to get in trouble, but the consequences just don't matter at that moment. You're just so keen to stop being bored and to distract yourself with something. There's also a thing with a lot of ADHD kids where they feel like they're getting bored, so they sort of reach out and just poke someone. They want that conflict because suddenly it's not boring anymore. Now there's a conflict to get them fired up. So I just seeing it in 3 of my kids and learning more about it, I wonder too if when I was younger I had it and I kind of adapted, and I just sort of grew out of it, because you can do that. You can become easier as you get older.
I guess probably the way of growing out of it is simply because in life, then as you grow, you're going to focus on something that you like. Because in life you are not going to be you are a teacher, so you're not teaching history and geography and math
you're doing
and
the
science.
thing you want to do.
You're what you like. Right?
And I can remember being in a drama class in university, and it was so unbelievably boring, and I was enraged. Like my skin was crawling. I was squirming. I couldn't believe. I was so angry. I wanted to get out of there, and I was just furious. And I look back, I remember it so clearly, because I was also thinking, why are you so angry? Just sit there and wait until it's over. But I was absolutely enraged, and I think that was it. I think that it was just boredom was so painful for me.
And you were able to stay still, which is, it's okay, but some kids, they are not. And therefore, they are then labeled because they are not able to just support.
It could be just personality differences. But in that moment, I remember thinking, I cannot take this. I cannot take this. I was so angry, which is not really a normal reaction. But yeah, I think for me, it's been helpful dealing with their different learning styles too, because part of my job is to give them each what they need. And if I have more information about what works for them or what doesn't, for instance, my eldest son went to a learning assessment, and he was found to be in the 99.9th percentile for verbal recall. So if somebody said something to him, he would remember it almost perfectly. So that helped me to approach his learning, because I'm not going to repeat things for him. I don't have to worry about that. We're going to move on to something else. And
that probably just listening to it is enough for him. While other people, they might be reading it or seeing.
They need to do something tactile. My middle daughter needs something more tactile. So yeah, it was also a confirmation for me that he was in the right place, because certainly when I went to school, there was a lot of repetition. The teacher would say something, and then repeat it one more time. Then the next class, she'd repeat so everyone
and
could
the
catch
next year
up.
you just start doing everything that you have done.
There's a lot of waiting for
Yeah.
things to be repeated. Yeah, so I think that would have really been difficult for him.
Which is also probably sometimes the cause of some problems for some kids, because they're just getting bored of,
Yeah.
there are differences in kids. So some, they need that repetition and they need to go slow, and some others they don't.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for in one class. And what about, since the theme of, being mixed aged in a class, like it is for your class, for example, for your home, how does it work? Do they work actually together? Do they study things together, or they're very individual?
It depends on how I structure it. Sometimes I just get, because I don't want to present this happy picture of everybody sitting down and doing their work obediently, because that's not how it is. Usually, in order to get them to do the stuff that I want them to do, I have to somehow threaten or bribe or somehow, of course, you're not going to go skating until you've done this. So just sit down. Okay, you've got 20 minutes to do this, or we're not going. That kind of thing. If they sense that I'm really, really getting frustrated, they might sit down and work more cooperatively. But usually, usually there's some overlap. For instance, my 12-year-old and my 10-year-old are both memorizing their multiplication tables at the same time. I tried with my 12-year-old earlier. She didn't really take to it, but then a couple of years later, she was taking to it at the same time. The 10-year-old.
Do they actively help each other, or they ask for support from each other, or it's you?
They very rarely help each other.
Okay.
Sometimes they do, and when they do, it's magical. It's Christmas anytime. It's just, oh, I can't believe it's working. That's the best possible situation. It doesn't happen very often.
Okay. Do you think there is anything that can facilitate that?
Everybody being in a good mood, which also doesn't happen very often.
Christmas time, as you said.
Yes.
It's a Christmas day whenever it happens.
They're very good at playing together. They're not so good yet at working together,
right.
Unless it's an idea that they came up with. If they're working on building something or making an obstacle course or planning some game, they work together really well.
Right.
But if it's like, can you please help her with her long division? That's hard.
It's a different story.
That's a different story. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to add anything about, pretty much the interview we are doing with many homeschooler moms and dads, but most of the time it's moms, because dads are working and they're out, etc. It's just to help create a little bit of awareness for other people, especially in countries back like mine, for example, in Switzerland, where homeschooling is almost non-existing, because it's not even given the option, or you're simply not allowed, because it's not allowed by law to homeschool. So what would you say, in to parents that they are watching, what is the good and the bad, the ups and downs of homeschooling?
You have to enjoy your kids. You have to enjoy who they are, but I would say that homeschooling the homeschooling kids I meet are just fantastic. So I think parents do a lot of the time just enjoy spending time with them. There's something about being protected from that school environment and the competitiveness and the bullying and the teasing and everything. I think that really is good for them. I would say don't worry about not being a teacher. That would be the first thing I would say, because a lot of people say to me, oh, I wish I could homeschool, but I'm not a teacher.
Not every parent is a teacher.
Yeah, that's not how it just doesn't even apply, really. If you love your kids and you have the ability to look things up and do a bit of research, then that's really all it takes. And it's not even a lot of research. I mean, it's easy to find online what the curriculum is. But the other thing is, too, there's a really good argument to be made for not teaching them much of anything at all. If you read John Holt, for instance, I find that very empowering, because he reminds us that really kids can learn a lot on their own. We do not have to be... There's a certain amount of ego, I think, in adults thinking that they have to tell kids everything. They are very capable of figuring out what they want to on their own.
And they often know much more than we think.
Yeah. So I think I would just tell people that if they feel in their gut like their kids are not doing well at school and their kids are being almost damaged emotionally, whether it's their confidence or their imagination or whatever, don't be afraid of trying it, because it's been fantastic for us. It's exhausting, but it's also really great. So yeah, read people like John Holt and look at Ken Robinson stuff and Rianne Eisler, all fantastic sources that are they make a lot of sense. It just feels right, you know. It's like intellectually, it's
enough
correct.
to listen to TED Talks from Ken Robinson, and I've been also reading John Holt. But I mean, whenever you read something like that, if you like being a parent, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And the fear, though, because here in Canada you're very open and you are supported from the government to be pretty much doing whatever you want with kids, right? So you can homeschool, you're very free. But back again in what I know as a reality, but we've been traveling New Zealand, Australia, etc. So it's very often what's the number one fear for parents is future. Like you know, society wants you with a piece of paper in the hand, and to be able to enter that school, that university, etc. So what is, from your perspective, with your husband, how do you face that? Or if you did already, I'm sure that you have been thinking at least about it.
I try not to think about it.
Right.
There's a lot they can do later on. For instance, I believe they can take the final year of high school. They can get credits by doing booklets and submitting them to the Board of Education.
Okay.
So there is that. I think also it would be possible for them to take part-time courses at college or university. And once they've passed that course, they've kind of established they can do the work. Yeah. But there's lots of stuff they can do to establish later on. They don't have to start doing that right now. You know, if they were to take 5 high school courses in the final year of high school and pass all those courses, what education, who's going to turn them down, you know?
Sure.
Especially given that they have this very different upbringing. You know, I think given the emphasis that we all place on kids who are imaginative and flexible and, you know, problem solvers and good team, they will have skills that are highly desirable, and that many other kids don't have in such strength, right? Because they've come through an alternative beginning, so they look at things differently.
And probably the biggest breakthrough in this kind of education is that the kids, they really grow with a self-awareness of what they really want to do, and not just going through school and, you know, high school and university and making decisions out of society pressure and parents pressure, so they end up having a diploma in the hand, which is not really, you know, something that they
really expensive make. Because it was so expensive to get that degree, and now they feel like they have to carry through and do that,
and it's very often so.
Everything's changing, you know. You don't need a resume anymore. You can show someone an app you designed. Are you going to go to the University of YouTube, or are you going to go to the university of, you know, that costs $100,000? Now, as a teacher, I think there's a really, really important place for university, and I got a huge amount from my university education. I would never say don't go to university, but I would also never say that's the only way. And I'm fortunate that I do what I love. I know a lot of kids, because I teach at college, a lot of them have no idea what they love, and they're scared. They have never been given the chance to stop, you know, and figure out what they want to do, because they've been so busy trying to get their required courses. Crazy stuff like trigonometry and calculus, stuff that they'll never use. Communications and general education. It's a lot of cultural studies. But the amount of time that high school kids spend learning, you know, core French, which is the worst way to learn a language, and trigonometry and calculus and algebra, things that most of them will not use, when they could have been spending that time
making something that they like,
trying different stuff and learning more about what options are out there. So I hope that my kids have that.
I'm pretty sure they will. Right. Thank you, Latham.
Thank you.
Thanks.